in the fourth turn. This is his final trip around turn number 4. And Jeff Gordon is about to write his name in the racing history books. Years from today, when 79 stock car races have been run here, we'll remember the name. Jeff Gordon, winner of the inaugural Brickyard 400. Man, oh man, oh man.
August 6th, 1994. Many know of the famous call by Bob Jenkins as 23-year-old Jeff Gordon crossed the yard of bricks in victory. To many young fans, the magnitude of this race, this moment, is not understood and really never explained. But at one point, this race was on the level of the Daytona 500. In the 1994 edition alone, 86 teams and drivers entered into the event and ran 2 days of qualifying to determine the field. It was an honor to each of them to run this race. But 28 years into the future, and this prestigious event has fallen to this.
Almost clear of the 8 car. 8's going to try to outbrake him down here in the braking zone.
Right, on your left, one on your right now. Middle.
A lot of contact. Around goes 2 cars, 3 cars now around.
The 9 car. Chase Elliott has spun out.
24 of William Byron also has been around. And now, Eric Jones in the 43 goes around.
Truex, Dillon.
Austin Dillon in the 3, stops in the gravel.
How have we gotten to this point? How has this event that once held so much prestige been resorted to a road course wreckfest in a span of nearly 3 decades? To understand how and why, let's go over the death of the Brickyard. The year is 1991, and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is looking at something they haven't done in nearly 75 years: run a second race on the oval. It had become a tradition among the Speedway to only run the Indianapolis 500, but with the appeal to run another race at an all-time high, it was bound to happen. Around this time, when discussions were beginning, A.J. Foyt filmed a commercial at the track for the Craftsman Tools brand. After filming, track president Tony George and A.J. took a cup car on track, each turning some laps. Starting in 1992 was a flurry of tests. In March, IROC tested at the Speedway. Then on June 22nd and 23rd, the top Cup Series teams went out to test at the track. The 9 teams ran around the track in front of 10,000 spectators, and they came to the realization: a stock car race at Indy was possible. Just over 2 weeks before the month of May in 1993, Tony George and Bill France Jr. made the announcement of the birth of the Brickyard 400.
The name of the event will be the Brickyard 400, and it will be a 400-mile, 160-lap race.
Record-setting crowds and prize money are expected.
You know, the first time you make a lap around a racetrack, you come down the front straightaways and you got grandstands on each side. To see those full of people will probably be the overwhelming side.
I think if you ask the competitors, that they would say, I don't care how much money they pay, I don't care if they pay any money, I just want to be the first one to win at Indy. And I think that's the attitude that they'll all have, and I think that's the way they'll go at it too.
To keep the sanctity of the Indy 500, the race was only 400 miles long, and was placed on Saturday, August 6th, 1994. It was not to be run on Sunday, to still allow the 500 to be the only 500-mile Sunday race at the Speedway. The race was immediately generating publicity. Dozens of people were suddenly rumored to be attempting the race. ABC and ESPN signed to cover the event, and in many people's eyes, the event had already approached hype levels comparable to that of the Daytona 500. The inaugural race saw a staggering 86-car entry list. Qualifying would take so long it would need 2 days to run. And in the end, only 43 drivers would make the race. Notable DNQs for the first race was Joe Ruttman, Randy LaJoie, Dick Trickle, Gary Bettenhausen, Mike Wallace, Ron Hornaday Jr., Herschel McGriff, James Hilton, Charlie Glotzenbach, Del McCower, and Butch Gilliland. Notable drivers who did make the race were Jeff Brabham, A.J. Foyt, and Danny Sullivan. As the day of the race came along, many traditions were being established, just like the Indy 500. As a guest at the Speedway, Jim Nabors was invited to sing the national anthem. The Indiana State University Marching Band was also invited. Mary F. Holman would give the command just like she and her husband would do for the 500 every year.
Gentlemen, start your engines!
The flyover would be performed by F-16s, and NASCAR invited all former living Cup champions to the track. Just as in the Indy 500, they released the balloons above the racetrack. The attendance was estimated at just over 350,000 people, and for the first time, the Brickyard 400 went green.
Acres of real estate in the northwest section of Indianapolis, Indiana. A new tradition begins as the green flag is about to come out to signal the beginning of the inaugural Brickyard 400. And the green is out.
Dale Earnhardt in the first race wanted to lead the first lap so badly he slammed the wall off of turn 4, and the race overall was highly competitive. 22 lead changes at the line, and a situation where brothers Jeffrey and Brett had a moment between one another, which resulted in both of them having a feud for nearly over a decade. Young Jeff Gordon would go on to win the race, and begin to cement his legacy as an all-time great. The first race was an incredible success, and only carried the hype for 1995. 1995 proved to be another successful race. Dale Earnhardt won and claimed that he was the first man to win the Brickyard 400, taking a jab at Jeff Gordon's victory from the year prior. The third edition of the Brickyard featured a battle between both Yates Racing Fords. Dale Jarrett would eventually claim the win and establish himself as a future legend of the sport. Dale also established possibly one of the greatest traditions in Indianapolis Motor Speedway history. After his win, he and his crew chief Buddy Parrott ran on track and kissed the famous yard of bricks. It wasn't viewed as much at the time, but it started a tradition that lives on to this day, and actually translated over into the Indy 500. The fourth Brickyard was won by veteran Ricky Rudd in a daring battle with Bobby Labonte. He continued his 15-year win streak and held the momentum of the Brickyard. 1998's edition featured probably the least competitive race thus far. Gordon led a record 97 laps and dominated a 9-caution race en route to his second victory in the Brickyard. In 1999, Dale Jarrett dominated the race even more than Gordon the year prior. He led 117 laps and claimed the win by over 3 seconds. Whilst the race the last 2 years had not been as good as the previous 4, 250,000 people were still showing up to the event, and the prestige of winning the race was still there. Jarrett and Gordon both went on to win the title those years as well, and the only driver to have won the event up to this point and was not a champion of the sport was Ricky Rudd. 2000 proved to be a race of strategy, as Bobby Labonte pulled the race out from under the dominant Rusty Wallace car, winning the Brickyard en route to his 2000 championship. 2001 was the first time they moved the race to a Sunday, and was returned to also competitive racing. Gordon would become the first to win his third 400, but would only lead in the final 125 miles. 2002 became iconic for Bill Elliott, winning the event as it capped off an iconic return to prominence for the future Hall of Famer. The race overall was also very competitive, and was still well received. 2003 again was displayed in front of a crowd of nearly 300,000 people, and the race was varied in who would win. In the end, a young Kevin Harvick claimed the victory. This was Harvick's first large accomplishment in his career, and secured his 29 ride for the foreseeable future. In the 11th running, Jeff Gordon won his 4th Brickyard in a heavily caution-plagued race. It became the first race to go into green-white checkered finishes, and Gordon led the then race record 124 laps. It was probably the worst 400 yet, but overall, the race still had lost little to no prestige. The 2005 race became more competitive again. Still with 10 cautions, native Hoosier and IndyCar champion Tony Stewart claimed victory at the track he had loved for so long, and enforced his run at a second title. 2006 was another good showing as Jimmy Johnson claimed his first Brickyard, which also propelled him to a title. The race overall was competitive again, and had an audience of nearly 300,000 still. 2007 featured another great battle between Kevin Harvick and Tony Stewart, with Stewart again claiming a Brickyard. It was a second win in the event, but it marked the end of the Brickyard's golden era. The 2008 edition of the Brickyard is probably the most embarrassing moment in the last 15 years for Goodyear and NASCAR. This was the first Brickyard with NASCAR's new car tomorrow, and the first time the new car and tire combination will be trying to race on a diamond groove cut racetrack. Diamond grooving is when a machine is brought over the track to cut little channels into the asphalt in order to provide more grip for the cars. However, more grip leads to more strain on tires, and the wear for the 2008 Cup weekend was incredibly excessive. Therefore, officials, in order to keep the race as scheduled, instituted caution breaks every so many laps. The idea of just trying to subside the issue led to one of the most embarrassing races in NASCAR history.
Showed you Carl Edwards avoiding disaster a moment ago. Whoa, trouble, 55. Michael Waltrip smacks the wall hard. Debris coming off the car, a couple of cars going around him. That's Terry Labonte just able to get by.
Hit that wall very hard. He was coming off the corner. Actually, it looks like Kurt Busch lost the car and then hit the right front of Kevin's car, maybe blowing that tire out, but they both hit the wall pretty hard. Green, off pit road, he's going to get out without losing a lap.
Guys. They're coming. Just stay high. Give them a little room.
And here's another tire blown out on the 42 car, Montoya. Caution is out.
Caution.
17 car, Casey Kane going by. Whoa. And there it was. Oh, look at the pieces coming apart. Part of the window coming out.
Caution is out. Competition, yo.
Well, that's the first time we've made it to that without any incidents.
Competition yellow, number 5. The yellow out now for
and he's also
competition yellow, and now they're gonna get him for speeding.
Still green. I don't know if they're gonna throw it up this deep.
Caution out the 83 car. And smoke billowing from the Brian Vickers Toyota. Caution number 9. Another competition yellow here with 39 laps to go. Yellow flag waving, Dave. This is another one of the competition yellows.
Now around Jeff.
Caution's out. Good job.
13 laps was the longest run without a caution. Over 50 laps paced under yellow, and in the end, Jimmie Johnson came out victorious. Many claim that this was the moment the Brickyard died, and that may be true, but there still was salvageability for the event. The prestige wasn't lost. One bad race surely can't erase the previous 15 events, and as long as the problem is fixed for 2009 and onwards, there is still hope. In a way, the 2008 disaster was a worst-case scenario for the Brickyard. It occurred during the first year of the reunification of American Open Wheel, and the popularity of the Indianapolis 500 was returning in waves. While not completely contributing to its success, the decayed interest in the greatest spectacle in auto racing from the split, coupled with the divided fan base, could have heavily contributed to the success of NASCAR's event at the track. But with no open wheel split for 2008 onwards, open wheel fans and Indy enjoyers could finally focus on just one series. It was also around 2008 that IndyCar and NASCAR were no longer the only thing being run at the track. F1 had some forays into the track with disappointing results. MotoGP began racing there. IndyCar was looking at having another race there on the road course, and various sports car invitational events were also being run there. By 2016, they were holding air races at the track. But again, this was not the sole reason the race had lost its luster. NASCAR was also well out of its boom period, and was facing steeply declining TV ratings. 2009 had the Brickyard's lowest attendance ever, 180,000 people. Many of the problems from last year were fixed, but the race was dominated by Juan Pablo Montoya, until an untimely speeding penalty. This led to a nail-biting race between Jimmie Johnson and Mark Martin, and Johnson again became victorious, and the poor show in 2009 compounded with the 2008 race led to a lower 2010 attendance. 140,000 people showed up, by far the lowest mark. James McMurray won the race, and possibly the least illustrious name to win the race so far. McMurray was still highly respected and is a Daytona 500 winner. McMurray would fail to go on to make the chase that year, and overall had a very up and down season. The big issues of the race for 2010 was the lack of passing and even lower attendance. The 2011 race possibly had the best racing since 2007, and had Paul Menard winning a heartwarming story for his family at the Speedway. 2012 was a return to mediocre shows, with Jimmie Johnson dominating and winning his 4th Brickyard. And 2013 was at best barely a step up from the 2012 showing. 2013 was the last time they posted attendance numbers, and awaiting results showed only 70,000 people at the track for 2013. Arguably, 2014 was the last glimmer of legendary moments in the Brickyard history, mainly due to Jeff Gordon winning a staggering 5th Brickyard. He had to beat Kasey Kahne on a late race restart around the top groove, and proved that he still could put it on in the clutch. This was arguably the end of the descent era. As from 2015 on, we entered the dark ages. "2015 was a terrible race, but the new lower horsepower package did not mix with the track nearly as well. 2016 saw 3 records happen in the race: the least amount of lead changes, the most laps led by a single driver, and the most overtimes ever in the 400. Kyle Busch led the final 109 laps and turned more fans off of the oval than ever. The waves of clamoring to leave Indy were staggering, and the once illustrious race was now resorted to one of the most dreaded races on the Cup Series schedule. 2017 was perhaps the most embarrassing 400 since 2008. Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. dominated much of the first half of the race, to which they both wrecked one another for the lead. This led to one of the most wreck-filled portions of the Brickyard ever. Barely half of the field would finish the race. There would be 5 consecutive instances where the field would run one lap and wreck. Only 14 cars finished this race without an incident. And Kasey Kahne would, with what would be his last career victory, come home and kiss the bricks. 2018 NASCAR started attempting to restore some of the hype around the Brickyard. They moved the date off its early August, late July weekend and made it the last race before the playoffs. The race overall was alright, but there was little to no hype for the event. 2019 was another poor race, with Kevin Harvick winning, and once again, the date was moved. NASCAR put it on the July 4th weekend, hoping it could be their new 4th of July tradition. It only lasted a year. Kevin Harvick won again, after the dominant car of Hamlin lost a tire, and the race featured Matt Kenseth's last top 5 of his career. And without anybody knowing or even seeming to care, this would turn out to be the last race run on the oval. For 2021, they started running on the infield road course, which for the first 60 laps of the race seemed like an alright idea, until
2 that lead the way through 4, now into 5 and turn 6. All of that contact between the 2 leaders is allowed. Oh, the 24 is spinning. The 24's, oh, there's multiple cars into the wall here. There must be oil or some kind of fluid down on the racetrack right there in turn. We got more cars coming in. William Byron is reporting that the curb came up. He hit the curb in the 24.
The race was a wreck fest afterwards. People got DQ'd for cutting the course, and there was a caution period that lasted for 10 laps spanning over a half hour. This year's race was not any better. The end turned into an 8-wide use the person in front of you braking challenge, which resulted in some of the most embarrassing moments in the race's history. I try to remove personal opinion and statements from these videos, but it is definitive that the Brickyard has become a joke that it never should have become. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway is too sacred of a place in racing to put on this low quality of a racing show. Is the road course the answer? Personally, I doubt it. Is the oval the answer? I don't know. Personally, I want the oval back. Would it put on a good show? I couldn't confirm that. But the most important thing in order to continue with this race is to embrace the history of the track. Respect what the Indianapolis Motor Speedway represents in racing history. Carry the traditions that got us to this point in the Brickyard's legacy, and not butcher them for the sake of cheap entertainment and borderline worthless racing. It should be an honor to race at the Brickyard, a privilege to drive on the soil that so many men came and died on, pursuing the ultimate motorsports glory. And until we achieve that appreciation, NASCAR should never race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.